Hey guys, we are back. Today we're going to talk about buying a home without a CO. And a CO in real estate lingo is a certificate of occupancy. CO, certificate of occupancy. Mason, what do we have to be concerned about here?
Well, for the people that don't know what a CO is, let's slow down. Township inspection. Every town, I won't say every, but most towns have a certificate of occupancy. It's their township inspection, so they could check a whole list of things, or it could be nothing.
Well, not
Right.
nothing, but just a few things.
Minimal. Yeah, it could be very minimal. So some could check electricity, some could check plumbing, some could check just a fire extinguisher, stuff like that. It really just depends.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Exactly. So it could be as little in most cases here in New Jersey as a fire inspection, which is the proper smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detector, and typically a fire extinguisher in the kitchen or very close to it. Or it could be the other extreme, just like you were saying, could be extremely comprehensive, including checking for permits and GFCI outlets in the right places. And I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And it'll vary from town to town, right?
Yeah.
So what kind of concerns would we have about buying a house without obtaining a certificate of occupancy for closing?
Well, it's an issue, just like anything else. Now the buyer's responsible post closing for anything that comes up, any open permits, which you mentioned, which is a huge thing, any electrical issues, any plumbing issues that the township deems as an issue.
Yeah.
That all need to be fixed, So we'd like to have that usually done prior to closing, just for the buyer's sanity, and that way they don't have to worry about it after closing and get fined.
Yeah. So there's always the question of, is there a legal violation here or not? There's differences of opinion that we've heard as real estate agents. I don't know what the answer is. I'm not sure about the correct answer there. But sometimes the seller makes a good faith effort to obtain the CO, and there are challenges that arise, and they don't quite have it, and they still need to close. Because remember, a lot of real estate transactions are connected to other real estate transactions. Then, of course, there are moving companies involved and lots of other things that a lot of people don't think about. But there's a lot of stuff going on at the time someone is buying or selling a house. So it's not, extending a closing date is not necessarily a viable option in many cases. So there's a lot of that going on. And then sometimes the buyer is actually responsible to handle that as well. But in the event that a closing needs to take place and a certificate of occupancy passing certificate is not in hand, what can we do?
You could have them sign what's called a hold harmless agreement. And from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, it's basically title company is not responsible for anything that goes on. Lender is not responsible, and it's all basically put on the buyer.
Yeah, pretty much. Essentially, that hold harmless certificate is usually a byproduct of the title company, because it comes down to CYA, right? The title company just wants to make sure that they're not going to get themselves into any trouble, and that all the parties to the transaction realize that they don't have a certificate here. Now, footnote to that, or side note, some towns will just give you a temporary, right? We've seen that before. Again, varies by town. I wish every town here was the same, but they're not.
Yeah.
Literally, we cover 3 to 5 counties on a daily basis. It's probably a couple of hundred towns, and they're all different. They're just all different. So sometimes that hold harmless is a way. Sometimes the temporary certificate is a way. And sometimes the townships will have a document for the parties to sign that say, hey, or especially the buyer, hey, I understand I'm buying the house without a final certificate of occupancy, and I promise not to sleep there or occupancy, get it? Occupy the property until I have that final certificate. So it really depends.
Yeah.
Right? So I guess the short answer here is, yeah, you can close in many cases. I would say not every case, because nothing is ever 100%, right? But
Yeah.
you can close in many cases without that certificate, as long as some other documentation is signed and everybody is aware of what the limitations are by closing that way. Oh, by the way, sometimes a mortgage company requires it too.
Yeah.
You know,
So that could be-
sometimes. I haven't seen that as much lately in the last few years. I used to see that more, but we just kind of, we kind of barrel through a real estate transaction with the assumption that we're going to need that certificate. We're going to get that certificate, and we should have that certificate in time for closing, regardless of which side of the transaction we're representing, because it's always good to have that completed by
A
the
lot of
time.
title companies require it too. A lot of them.
That's true. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
They really like to see that. Yeah. And it's just, and sometimes as long as the fire stuff passes, sometimes a township will give it temporary. And sometimes, depending on the town, all they really care about is the fire stuff. And
Yeah.
it's simple, So even if it's a real nasty house and you're going to do a lot of work to it, sometimes you still have to put up a few smoke detectors and make sure that we pass that fire inspection just to make sure we are in compliance from that standpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Anything else we should know about buying a house without a CO?
No, that's it.
All right. All right, Little Bear, aka Mr. Greenblatt. Once again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for watching. Good to see you again, and we will be back again real soon.